Penelope's bare feet splashed through the puddles in the moonlit courtyard, her ripped wedding gown clinging to her trembling body. Rain soaked her hair, plastering it to her pale cheeks, and the metallic tang of blood stung where the lace had torn against her wrist. Every footstep echoed against the stone walls, but still she ran, away from the Earl, away from the suffocating expectations of her family, away from a life that had never belonged to her. Her lungs burned, chest heaving with the frantic rhythm of fear. The sound of hooves behind her made her heart thud violently. He was coming, always coming. Lord Everett Blackwell would not let her escape quietly. Not when her voice had threatened to undo him. Not when she had glimpsed the truth behind his charming mask. She rounded the corner, and the lights of the manor's ballroom spilled into the storm, warm gold spilling like a forbidden promise. She pushed the door open, drenched, shaking, and stumbled into the grandeur. Candles flickered, reflecting off crystal chandeliers. The murmurs of the guests froze midward. Penelope's lips parted, and she let out a shuddering breath before the first note of her song cut the air, raw, trembling, and filled with despair. It was a sound no one could ignore. Her voice rose and fell like the wind in the trees outside, carrying every ounce of terror, defiance, and longing. The Duke's eyes, sharp and cold, were the first to pierce through the storm of her pain. Eldred Hawthorne, the silent Duke, felt his chest tighten as if her voice had pulled some hidden cord inside him. The ballroom seemed to vanish, the chandeliers, the gossiping ladies, the ivory floors, all faded. There was only her voice. Her knees buckled, and she sank to the floor, tears streaming down her face, blending with the rain dripping from her soaked hair. Guests murmured, gasping, but none dared approach. Eldred moved, swift and silent, until he was kneeling beside her, gloved hand hovering over her shoulder, hesitant, respectful, calculating. "No one touches her," he said, low, unyielding, and turned to the staff, commanding without raising his voice. "Lock the doors. Now." Penelope's heart pounded, but the strange calm in his tone, the authority that radiated without arrogance, made her flinch with confusion. She wanted to flee, yet a part of her wanted to stay, to breathe, to let herself be seen for the first time in her life. The notes of her song trembled into silence, leaving only the echoes of her despair in the grand hall. He helped her to her feet, not with the roughness of a man used to giving orders, but with the careful precision of someone handling something fragile, precious. "You are not safe," he whispered, and she caught the first real truth in his eyes. Not judgment, not curiosity, but understanding. A spark of trust, dangerous as it felt, ignited in the pit of her stomach. Moments later, a steward appeared, silently taking her damp cloak and tattered gown, replacing them with a spare silk dress. Penelope trembled, pulling at the fabric that smelled faintly of rosewater and candle wax, feeling the difference between suffocation and sanctuary. The Duke led her through the hidden corridors of Hawthorne Court, past portraits of ancestors with stern faces, past long shadows that seemed to whisper secrets. He never let go of the tension radiating from her like heat. She stole glances at him, this man who had appeared from nowhere yet commanded her attention with a single glance. Eldred Hawthorne, tall, impeccably dressed in midnight blue, hair black as raven's wings, eyes a storm of steel and storm clouds, jaw tense, moved with the precision of someone used to controlling chaos. His presence was a paradox, both a wall and a shield, both fearsome and comforting. "Why are you helping me?" Penelope finally whispered, voice trembling. She expected a cold dismissal, a calculated excuse, but instead he merely met her gaze. "Because no one deserves to be hunted like this," he replied. "And because your voice, it deserves to be heard." Her throat tightened at the words, as if hearing them aloud made the years of silencing her almost tangible. She had been trained to be invisible, to speak only when permitted, to smile and obey. Yet here he was, telling her she mattered, telling her she could exist beyond her fear. They reached a small, candlelit chamber, private and safe for now. The Duke gestured for her to sit, standing guard by the door. Penelope sank onto the velvet chaise, her fingers trembling as she brushed rain-soaked hair from her face. Eldred surveyed the room with an alert intensity, noting every shadow, every potential threat, every possible escape route. His mind raced ahead, plotting, strategizing, shielding. And yet, every so often, his gaze fell on her, lingering a fraction longer than necessary, betraying an interest beyond duty. Penelope felt the weight of it, not just the protection, but something unspoken, something dangerously intimate. Her heart, still hammering from flight, from fear, from the storm, dared to beat for him. She closed her eyes, letting herself breathe. For the first time, she felt a flicker of hope, fragile and luminous, even as the night outside raged on. Somewhere deep within, she knew the storm was not over. But for this fleeting, impossible moment, she was safe, seen, and against all reason, unafraid. Penelope woke with a start, the sunlight slicing through the tall windows of Hawthorne Court like a blade. Her chest heaved, and for a moment, she thought she was still running, still fleeing the fate that had chased her across stormy streets. Only the soft warmth of the room and the faint scent of wax and rose water told her she was somewhere else, somewhere safer. Yet fear still clung to her like a second skin. The door opened with a soft click, and Eldred Hawthorne entered, his presence filling the room even before his eyes met hers. He moved with the precision of a predator assessing a threat, yet there was no malice, only measured care. "You slept," he said, voice low, controlled. "Good. Rest is necessary if you are to survive what comes next." Penelope swallowed, her throat dry. I don't know what comes next," she admitted, voice small and brittle. Her bare feet touched the cool floor as she rose, instinctively testing the space for exits, for shadows, for danger. Eldred's gaze followed her, calm yet unyielding, and it unnerved her more than the storm ever had. "First," he said, "you need a name that can hide you. Laura. You are Laura now, a music protege. No one here knows you." His words were precise, deliberate, instructions, not a request. But the authority in them made her pause. She had lived her life under rules she never chose. This was different. This was a lifeline. Her hands trembled as she smoothed the silk dress that had replaced her soaked gown. It smelled faintly of lavender and candle wax, a combination that made her stomach twist with nerves. She glanced at Eldred. You trust me?" The words escaped before she could stop them, laden with disbelief and a hint of longing. Eldred's eyes met hers, and for the first time, they were not cold. They were steady, anchored. "I do. More than you know. But trust is not enough. You must survive." The words were simple, yet heavy with unspoken meaning. A reminder that danger lurked beyond the walls, waiting to strike at any misstep. He left briefly, returning with a small desk, papers, and a quill. "Here," he said, gesturing toward the setup. "You will train, you will sing. Music hides more than it reveals, yet it also protects. It is your ally, Penelope Laura." The name felt foreign on her tongue, yet she repeated it, tasting the possibility of reinvention. For the first time, she realized she had been invisible, voiceless, and bound by expectation her entire life. Here, she had a mask that could shield her, a voice that could rise without punishment. Eldred observed her as she hesitated over the quill, fingers poised but unsure. "Fear is expected," he said quietly. "But hesitation will not save you. Use your intelligence, your instincts, and your courage. You have more of all three than you believe." His praise was measured, not extravagant, yet it cut through years of self-doubt like sunlight through mist. Moments later, Arabella, now Laura, practiced scales under his watchful eye. Every note she sang, every tremble in her voice, drew Eldred in despite his efforts to remain detached. He noticed the subtle tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers lingered on the keys, the way she flinched at shadows, and he saw strength in every frightened gesture. Strength she did not yet recognize in herself. The steward returned with breakfast, silent but attentive. Eldred motioned for them to leave without a word. Alone, Penelope finally allowed herself a moment to breathe, sitting at the small table with bread and tea. Her mind raced with memories of her family, the Earl's cruelty, and the chaos she had escaped. But the warmth of the room, the soft glow of candles, and Eldred's quiet vigilance created a fragile cocoon around her fear. As she ate, her thoughts returned to the night before, to the haunting melody she had sung in the ballroom. That voice, her voice, had been the thread connecting her to the Duke, the key that had earned his protection. She realized for the first time that her gift could be a weapon, a shield, and a bridge. A voice, once silenced by fear and expectation, could now shape her destiny. Eldred re-entered, closing the door behind him with a soft click. His gaze lingered on her, sharp and unreadable. "You will have visitors," he said, "people loyal to me. You must appear as Laura, unafraid, confident." Any falter could draw attention. Her stomach twisted at the thought, but beneath the fear, a spark of determination ignited. She would play the part. She would survive. She would be heard. Later, as Eldred began instructing her on music theory, Penelope noticed subtle hints of his own restraint. The carefully constructed armor he wore like a second skin. Every measured word, every controlled gesture, spoke of a man who had learned to protect, to anticipate, to endure. Yet she sensed vulnerability beneath the steel, a man capable of feeling, of care, of something dangerous and deep. Hours passed in lessons, practice, and whispered conversation. A rhythm emerged, music and quiet trust, shared glances and subtle gestures that neither dared to name. And though fear lingered like a shadow, Penelope found herself daring to hope, daring to imagine that she could survive, perhaps even thrive, under the Duke's protection. Finally, as candlelight flickered across the room and shadows stretched long on the walls, Eldred spoke, voice low and commanding. "Rest now. Tomorrow, the world will try to find you again. But tonight you are safe. And for now, that is enough." Penelope closed her eyes, heart still racing. Yet for the first time, she let herself sink into the fragile peace. The storm outside continued, but inside Hawthorne Court, a different kind of storm. One of possibility, defiance, and the first tentative stirrings of trust began to grow. The sound of raised voices cut through the morning air, sharp and insistent. Penelope froze, heart hammering against her ribs, as she pressed herself against the heavy velvet drapes of the practice room. Through the partially open door, she glimpsed Eldred, his jaw tight, eyes storming with controlled fury. The Earl's name had been spoken, twisted into a lie that threatened to undo everything she had gained, everything Eldred had risked to protect her. They claimed she was kidnapped. Eldred's voice was low, dangerous, every syllable a strike against the world that dared challenge his control. "Do you hear me, Penelope? They are twisting your escape into scandal, into shame, into chains." Her stomach dropped. The walls that had felt like sanctuary moments ago now pressed in with invisible weight. She had fled to survive. She had sung to breathe. And now the world itself conspired to drag her back, to strip her of the small freedom she had clawed for with trembling hands. Eldred turned, his gaze catching hers. "You must be Laura. No one can know who you truly are." "Not yet." His voice softened, almost tender, though the edge never left it. "Every word, every action must reinforce the lie. Your safety depends on it." Penelope's lips parted, but no sound came. She nodded, the wordless acknowledgement more binding than any contract. Her heart thudded in time with the distant toll of the estate's clock tower. Each chime a reminder that time was slipping, that danger was rising. Later, as she walked toward the grand piano under Eldred's supervision, her fingers trembled over the ivory keys. The first note rang out, hesitant, fragile. Eldred leaned close, placing a guiding hand over hers. Their fingers touched, and a jolt shot through her, a mixture of fear, shame, and something else she couldn't name. "You're listening too closely," she whispered, heart racing, voice barely audible. "I always listen," he said, eyes dark with unspoken thoughts. "And I always see." His hand lingered a fraction longer, a silent tether, before sliding away. The fleeting contact left her pulse wild, her chest tight. It was a dangerous closeness, this intimacy born of secrecy and necessity, yet she could not pull away from the magnetic gravity of his presence. A sudden knock on the door made her flinch. Eldred's expression sharpened. "Do not speak. Do not move." His voice was low, commanding, a blade disguised as reassurance. He opened the door a sliver, letting in a young steward with a message. "The Earl has petitioned the court. He demands her return, or he will seize the Winters estate." The words were delivered without inflection, yet they cut like ice through Penelope's resolve. Eldred's hand clenched around the edge of the piano. "He's not after you," he said quietly, meeting her eyes with a fierce intensity. "He's after your family. He wants power. He wants wealth. And he will lie, manipulate, and destroy anyone who stands in his way." Penelope's throat tightened. Then I must hide. I must be Laura." The lie felt heavy on her tongue, suffocating, yet it was the only armor she had. Eldred stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You will not face this alone. I promised I would protect you, and I intend to keep that promise, even if it costs me everything." The room seemed to shrink around them, the air thick with tension, anticipation, and the silent acknowledgement of what their alliance meant. That evening, she walked through the corridors of Hawthorne Court under the guise of Laura, every glance from servants and visitors a potential threat. She felt the weight of observation, the razor-thin line between discovery and survival. Eldred's presence lingered behind her, invisible but undeniable, a shield she could almost touch. During her music lesson, as her voice rose in trembling clarity, Eldred's eyes never left her. He noted the subtleties, the slight tremor in her hands, the flare of defiance in her jaw, the raw emotion that bled into every note. She was a puzzle he could not ignore, a storm he could not contain, yet a treasure he was sworn to protect. The first spark of real intimacy came unexpectedly. Her song faltered, voice quivering with emotion, and Eldred stepped forward, hand barely brushing her shoulder. "It is enough," he said, voice low and steady. "Your voice, it speaks the truth no one else dares see." The words, soft yet commanding, struck her deeper than any melody. She swallowed, unable to respond, yet feeling an unfamiliar warmth, a fragile trust threading through her fear. Late into the night, she sat by the window, staring at the moonlit gardens. The storm outside had subsided, leaving only the soft murmur of wind through the hedges. She thought of the Earl, of the chaos he had wrought, of the delicate balance of lies and truths she now navigated. And she thought of Eldred, his strength, his silence, the way his presence had become both anchor and challenge. A shadow moved across the garden, and she froze, pulse quickening. Eldred appeared beside her, silent, protective, his gaze sweeping over the estate's perimeter. "You see, Penelope," he said quietly, "the world will not wait. You must be ready to fight, to deceive, to survive. And I will not let them take you." Her hand hovered over the window sill, fingers trembling. The first note of courage, of defiance, rose within her. Not a song yet, but a promise to herself. She would play this dangerous game. She would survive. And maybe, just maybe, she could allow herself to feel the impossible warmth that Eldred's presence inspired without fear. A scream cut through the night air, sharp and frantic, dragging Penelope from her restless sleep. She bolted upright in the guest room at Hawthorne Court, heart pounding as Eldred's shadow fell across the doorframe. His eyes were storm-dark, glinting with controlled fury. "They're here," he whispered, voice a low blade of warning. "The Earl's men. Searching. For you." Her pulse surged. Panic clawed at her chest. She had thought the estate was a sanctuary, that her false identity as Laura would protect her. Yet now, the fragile veil of safety had been shredded, revealing the relentless claws of the world she had tried to escape. Eldred moved with silent precision, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. "Follow me. Stay close. Do not speak. Do not falter." The urgency in his tone left no room for hesitation. Penelope's mind raced as they navigated the shadowed corridors, the sound of distant footsteps echoing like thunder in the stone halls. They reached the practice rooms, the smell of polished wood and lingering candle wax a familiar comfort, yet now it was a battlefield. Eldred guided her to the piano, insistence in every motion, a silent command that she obeyed without question. She pressed her fingers to the keys, playing a trembling melody meant to mask their movement, her heart synchronizing with the rapid cadence of her notes. "You must remember," Eldred said softly, leaning close, his breath brushing her ear. "Every sound, every gesture, every note is part of the disguise. You are Laura. No one else exists in this room but us. Do you understand?" Penelope nodded, her voice caught in her throat. His nearness was intoxicating and terrifying all at once. Each note she struck was a confession, each pause a question she dared not voice aloud. And through it all, Eldred's presence was an anchor, grounding her trembling form even as the world outside threatened to crush her freedom. The next morning brought a masquerade ball, a society event meant to celebrate alliances and appearances. Penelope had been coerced into attending, her music a cover for her disguise. She hid behind her mask, every flutter of her gown a potential exposure, every glance a threat of discovery. Eldred remained at her side, silent but vigilant, his hand brushing hers just enough to anchor her without revealing the intimacy the world would condemn. The ball swirled with danger. A socialite with sharp eyes, Lady Vexley, lingered near the piano, suspicion in every measured step. "Laura," she murmured under her breath, voice dripping with curiosity and malice. "I wonder if that voice belongs to someone else entirely." Penelope's chest tightened. One misstep, one recognition, and everything would unravel. Later, in the dimmed corridors of Hawthorne Court, Penelope confronted Eldred. "How can you stand it?" she whispered, voice trembling with a mix of awe and fear. "The secrecy, the lies, the constant danger?" Eldred's eyes softened, though the edges remained razor-sharp. "Because I know you are worth it. Every risk. Every sleepless night. Every moment of doubt." He reached for her hand, his thumb brushing over hers in a silent vow. "And because no one will ever touch you while I can prevent it." Their argument dissolved into shared confessions. Eldred revealed pieces of his past, failures, betrayals, and the icy fortress he had built around his heart to survive. Penelope listened, every note of his voice a crack in the wall of fear she had built around her own emotions. She realized that the Duke's restraint was a mirror to her own. Both had been caged by expectations, duty, and past mistakes. A sudden knock shattered the fragile intimacy. Eldred stiffened. Someone is watching. Always. And now it seems they've grown bolder. Penelope's pulse quickened, fingers brushing the piano keys as if to summon courage from the sound. That night, in the quiet of the candlelit practice room, Eldred guided her through a private lesson. Fingers accidentally met, lingering too long to be merely instructional. Their eyes locked, each discovering in the other a reflection of hidden longing, restrained passion, and the dangerous thrill of forbidden closeness. Penelope's voice wavered in the melody, a whispered confession of emotions she dared not name, yet could no longer deny. Outside, shadows shifted. The Earl's spies moved silently, their intent clear and deadly. Penelope felt the weight of her choices press against her chest. Every note, every gesture, every heartbeat could betray her identity. Yet in Eldred's presence, the fear transformed into determination. She would survive. She would fight. And she would sing, even if the world demanded silence. Moments later, a false clue surfaced. A discarded letter intercepted by the Earl's men suggested someone within Hawthorne Court was leaking secrets. Suspicion fell like a knife, cutting through the fragile trust Penelope had built. Eldred's gaze narrowed, a storm barely contained. "We cannot falter now," he murmured, fingers brushing her cheek. "If we fail, everything is lost. But I will not fail you. Not ever." The night deepened, bringing with it the quiet hum of anticipation and danger. Penelope's heart raced with every footstep, every rustle of silk, every whispered threat from the shadows. And through it all, Eldred remained her steadfast protector, the silent force that anchored her trembling soul. By the time the moon had risen high, Penelope's resolve solidified. She would navigate the treacherous waters of lies, masquerades, and secrets. She would learn to wield her voice as both shield and weapon. And she would allow, for the first time, the forbidden warmth of Eldred's presence to fill the spaces in her heart she had long thought unclaimable. The letter arrived at dawn, slipped under Penelope's door with the precision of a viper. She tore it open with trembling fingers, eyes scanning the words that made her blood run cold. "Return to the Earl, or your family will pay dearly. Your estate, your reputation, everything you hold dear will crumble." The weight of the threat pressed against her chest like a physical force, threatening to suffocate her. Eldred stood in the doorway, his shadow cutting across the room like a sword. He read over her shoulder, his jaw tightening, hands clenching until the knuckles whitened. "He won't stop," he said quietly, voice a low rumble that carried both warning and determination. "And now he's playing the only game he knows, fear." Penelope sank into the edge of the chaise, her fingers trembling as she tried to steady her heartbeat. "But Eldred, if I go back, he'll destroy everything my family has built. And if we stay," her voice faltered, the unspoken terror hanging between them, "he'll find us. And you. I can't be the reason someone else suffers." He knelt beside her, hands warm on her arms, anchoring her to the present. "Penelope, listen to me. We will not let him win. Not your family, not your voice, not you. You are not a pawn, and you never will be. His eyes, dark and unyielding, held her gaze with the weight of absolute conviction. She wanted to believe him. She had to. Minutes later, they pored over the documents she had secretly taken from her father's estate before fleeing. Among the dusted ledgers and carefully hidden letters lay the damning truth. Forged debts, manipulated signatures, falsified transactions. Every piece pointing directly to the Earl. Penelope's eyes widened as realization dawned. He's been building a web, not just to trap me, but to bleed my family dry. All this time, I thought it was about the marriage. Her voice trailed into a whisper. He wants everything. Eldred's hand brushed over hers, fingers brushing the trembling lines of paper like a promise. And that's why we strike first, he said, a glimmer of strategic fire lighting his storm-dark eyes. We use his own deception against him. We expose him. And then, his voice softened, almost tenderly, we make sure he never touches you again. Their alliance deepened as the morning stretched into a tense day of planning. Each interaction carried undercurrents of unspoken emotion. Fleeting touches, shared glances, and the quiet, electric thrill of proximity that neither dared name aloud. Penelope found herself studying the curve of Eldred's jaw, the way his mind raced behind those intense eyes, and the subtle way his hand lingered near hers, offering comfort without intrusion. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. A misplaced ledger in the Duke's private library revealed a financial trail too meticulously hidden for casual discovery. The exact figures the Earl had forged, the sequence of manipulations, the legal loopholes he had exploited. Penelope traced the ink with shaking fingers. Eldred, he's not just greedy. He's meticulous. He's obsessed. Eldred's lips pressed into a thin line, mind already racing. Obsessed and arrogant, which makes him predictable. He believes everyone bends to him, that no one sees the cracks in his empire. But we do, and we will exploit them. He exhaled, rare hint of vulnerability slipping through. But Penelope, this requires courage. The kind you've shown by fleeing, by speaking, by singing. Are you ready to wield it? Her chest tightened, breath catching. She had never felt more exposed, more alive, more dangerously close to something she didn't fully understand. I think so, she whispered, fingers tightening around the papers. If we do this, I trust you to guide me. That evening, a secret meeting in the candlelit hall revealed the first visible crack in the Earl's carefully curated facade. One of his agents, previously loyal, hesitated in delivering instructions. Penelope and Eldred exchanged a subtle glance, a silent acknowledgement that the tide could be turned with the right push. Every stolen look, every whispered plan, every note of music she played became a coded signal, a lifeline between them in the shadow of danger. Romantic tension deepened with each passing hour. During a piano lesson, Eldred corrected her hand position with a touch that lingered too long to be merely instructional. Their eyes met across the keys, and for a heartbeat, the world outside ceased to exist. Penelope's heart surged, desire, fear, and exhilaration crashing into one another. Yet the stakes kept their lips and confessions restrained. The threat of the Earl's vengeance was a constant blade over their heads. Night fell, and with it came the first direct threat. A carriage parked outside the estate, shadows moving stealthily. Penelope's pulse quickened. Eldred's presence was a silent promise. His hand brushed hers before he guided her to the secret passageways. Tonight, he murmured, voice low and commanding, we take the first step toward freedom. Together. Whatever happens, you are not alone. As she moved through the hidden corridors, each step a defiance against fear and constraint, Penelope realized something profound. The Duke's presence was not merely protection. It was trust, and it was love, fragile, terrifying, and unrelenting. And as the moonlight brushed through the high windows of Hawthorne Court, she made a vow to herself. She would fight, she would sing, and she would stand beside Eldred, whatever storms awaited. The door slammed shut behind her with a finality that made Penelope's chest constrict. The letter she had left for Eldred lay crumpled on the desk, words scrawled in desperation. I cannot let him bring ruin to you. I must go alone. Every step she had taken away from Hawthorne Court had felt like walking through fire, each echoing footfall a promise of heartbreak. The world outside the estate was a storm, dark, unforgiving, and merciless. By dawn, she had vanished into the fog-laden countryside, cloak pulled tight, hood low over her face. The wind whipped at her cheeks, tears mingling with rain, and the faint crack of a carriage wheel in the distance set her pulse hammering. Every shadow seemed alive, every rustle a threat. Her heart pounded not from the chill but from fear. Fear for herself, for Eldred, for the consequences of her absence. Eldred discovered her gone at first light, the room where she had slept still carrying the faint scent of lavender and old paper. He picked up her note, fingers trembling despite himself, reading the words again and again as if their repetition could summon her back. Rage, guilt, and helplessness collided inside him. "Penelope," he whispered, voice breaking the cold mask he always wore. "Why? Why would you leave me?" The steward, loyal and steadfast, watched silently, knowing nothing could soothe the storm in the Duke's chest. Eldred's hands clenched into fists, fingernails biting into palms as he swallowed back a roar that could have shaken the estate walls. Every memory of her voice, every glance across candlelit corridors, every accidental touch in secret lessons tormented him now. He had failed to protect her once, and that failure was unbearable. Penelope's journey was a desperate act of courage, but the miles did nothing to calm the terror gnawing at her insides. She could hear the Earl's carriage in the distance, hear the faint but unmistakable hum of men searching, feel the invisible chains of duty and expectation tightening around her shoulders. She had fled to protect Eldred, yet the thought of him discovering her absence, worrying, perhaps blaming himself, twisted her heart into tighter knots. The Earl was relentless. He cornered her in a ruined estate on the edge of the forest, the shadows of broken walls stretching long in the early morning light. His smile was predatory, eyes sharp with triumph. "Run, my lady," he said smoothly, voice dripping with mockery. "But you cannot outrun your obligations. You belong to your family, to me, to the world that watches and judges. Return, or everything you love dies." Penelope's hands shook, but her chin lifted. Fear could not anchor her. Despair could not chain her voice. "I belong to no one who would harm me," she whispered, voice quivering but resolute. "And you will not win." She bolted, the wet earth sucking at her skirts, heart hammering as adrenaline propelled her forward. Meanwhile, Eldred had gathered a small contingent, loyal men and allies, and tracked her through the woods. Each step was precise, calculated, guided by the knowledge of her courage and the meticulousness he admired. The knowledge of the Earl's schemes, now fully understood, burned in his mind like fire. "He thinks he can manipulate, control, destroy," Eldred muttered, eyes scanning the horizon, jaw tight. "He underestimates her, and he underestimates me." As the chase reached its peak, Penelope found herself trapped within the crumbling walls of the abandoned estate, the Earl closing in. Her breath came in ragged bursts, heart slamming against ribs, but she forced herself to focus. Every trick she had learned in hiding, every secret passage, every moment of quiet observation at Hawthorne Court became her weapon. She dodged, weaved, and moved like a shadow, mind and body working in tandem to stay one step ahead. And then, amidst the chaos, Eldred emerged. Silent as a wraith, eyes blazing with a mixture of fury and relief. "Penelope!" His voice cut through the morning fog, sharp, commanding, filled with unshakable certainty. She turned, breathless, and for a heartbeat the world narrowed to him. The unwavering protector, the man whose presence alone could anchor her fraying heart. Without hesitation, he confronted the Earl, standing between Penelope and the threat with a blade of conviction sharper than any steel. "Your games end here," Eldred declared, voice carrying authority and danger. The Earl faltered, unprepared for the unyielding force of love and strategy converging before him. Penelope stumbled toward Eldred, and the first real tears of the morning slid down her cheeks. I thought leaving would protect you," she confessed, voice breaking, every word raw with emotion. Eldred cupped her face, thumb brushing her wet cheek. "You protected nothing," he said softly, voice trembling with relief and anger. "You nearly destroyed me, and yet somehow you saved me too. Your courage is unmatched, Penelope." In that instant, the storm outside seemed to abate, replaced by the intensity of the moment. Two hearts, ragged but unbroken, entwined amidst fear and chaos. Penelope realized her flight had not been a surrender, but a testament to her strength. Eldred understood more clearly than ever that protection alone was not love. Presence, trust, and shared defiance of tyranny defined it. Together, they faced the ruins, breath mingling, eyes locked, understanding without words. Outside, the Earl seethed, powerless against their unity, powerless against the combination of courage and unwavering resolve. Penelope's heart, once tethered by fear, now surged with a fierce, uncontainable strength. The moment Eldred spotted the flicker of movement in the abandoned estate, his chest tightened as if the air itself had thickened. Penelope was there, cornered but defiant, every inch of her poised against the danger closing in. The Earl's men loomed, shadows stretching long and cruel, and yet she stood tall, voice trembling but resolute. "You will not break me." Eldred's boots sank into the wet earth as he raced forward, heart hammering, mind laser-focused. The storm of fear, guilt, and anger that had haunted him since her disappearance now merged into a singular clarity. She would not face this alone. The wind whipped at his coat, carrying the scent of damp earth and smoke from the torches of their pursuers, and every step felt like both a leap of faith and a charge into war. Penelope's eyes widened as she saw him emerge from the shadows, jaw tight, eyes ablaze. Relief and disbelief collided with her resolve. For a moment she faltered, body trembling, heart threatening to betray her with its frantic rhythm. Eldred reached her, words cutting through the tension. "Penelope, I will not let him harm you. Not now, not ever." His voice carried the weight of every promise he had ever held back, every silent vow, and it wrapped around her like armor. The Earl sneered, stepping forward with calculated menace. "Ah, the Duke arrives at last. How poetic." His tone dripped with mockery, but his eyes betrayed a hint of unease. "But even you cannot save her from the debts she brings, the ruin she carries." Penelope shook her head, chest rising with defiance. "I carry nothing but truth, and he has nothing but lies." Her words rang out clear, unyielding, and even the men surrounding the Earl hesitated at her audacity. Eldred moved beside her, shoulder brushing hers, a silent anchor. Every calculation, every plan he had run through in the hours since tracking her had led to this. A confrontation not of brute force alone, but of cunning, courage, and exposure. He pulled the bundle of papers from his coat, evidence they had gathered, forged debts, blackmail, letters. Every thread of the Earl's deceit laid bare. "You thought you could manipulate, control, and destroy," Eldred said, voice low, cutting through the mist like steel. "But your web is unraveling tonight." He handed the documents to Penelope, whose hands shook slightly as she read. Each line, each signature, each falsified claim revealed the full scope of the Earl's treachery. Penelope's eyes flared, courage igniting anew. "We expose him. We end this. Here. Now." Her voice no longer trembled with fear but sang with a fierce, unwavering determination. She stepped forward, placing herself in the center, the papers clutched like a sword. Eldred's hand slid to her back, steadying, supporting, but never shielding her from the strength she now commanded. The Earl's composure faltered as murmurs rose from his own men. The weight of truth pressed against the fragile mask of his authority. You cannot," he spat, but the conviction in Penelope's voice drowned his protest. "I will not be silent. I will not be a pawn. You will answer for everything, for the lies, the threats, the fear you have sown." Eldred's eyes never left hers, reading every flicker of doubt and every surge of bravery. He leaned close, whispering, "Speak, Penelope. They will hear you. I hear you." That affirmation, that unwavering presence, steadied her trembling hands, and her words flowed, sharp and melodic, cutting through the night. The men surrounding the Earl began to whisper among themselves, eyes darting to the documents, realization dawning. Their loyalty wavered, uncertainty replacing obedience. The Earl's charm, his webs of influence, could not withstand the twin force of Penelope's truth and Eldred's unshakable resolve. Penelope's voice rose, carrying across the ruined estate, reaching the distant trees and the approaching storm, carrying defiance, revelation, and vindication. "Your debts are false. Your lies are exposed. Justice will be served, and I will not step aside." The papers in her hands felt heavier with each declaration, not with burden, but with power. Eldred stepped closer, placing a firm hand over hers, aligning strength with strength. "Together," he murmured, "we face this. Together, we end him." The moment was electric, charged with fear, passion, and unspoken promises. Their unity was both shield and weapon, a silent declaration that nothing, Not threats, not lies, not terror, could undo what they had built between them. The Earl staggered under the weight of exposure, his mouth opening to protest, to threaten, to manipulate, but the words caught in his throat. The truth, undeniable, burned brighter than any deceit. And then Penelope, bolstered by Eldred's presence and her own courage, stepped forward with finality, slamming the evidence down upon the ground before him. "Your time is over," she said, voice ringing with authority. "Every secret, every threat, every stolen moment of fear, it ends tonight." The storm outside seemed to pause, the wind holding its breath, as the Earl's men shifted, allies abandoning him in silent revolt. Eldred's gaze met hers, burning with pride and relief. No words were needed. They had faced the abyss, and now, standing together, they had seized the edge of victory. Breathless and drenched, Penelope allowed herself a fleeting smile, glancing at Eldred. His jaw was set, eyes intense, but beneath it, a tenderness softened his expression. She had survived, they had survived, and the world, at least for this night, belonged to the truth and to them. Top of form. The ballroom erupted in scandal before the first toast could be made. Gasps rippled through the crowd as Penelope stepped forward, papers clutched in trembling hands, eyes ablaze with defiance. The Earl's smug smile faltered as every whisper, every judgmental glance turned toward him. This was his moment of triumph, and yet it cracked under the weight of truth. Eldred's presence at her side was a fortress. His hand brushed hers lightly, a silent anchor, a warning to anyone foolish enough to step closer. "Speak," he murmured, voice low, urgent, carrying the gravity of the stakes. "Now is the moment everything changes." Penelope drew a deep breath, letting the cool air of the candlelit room steady her racing heart. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, voice firm despite the tremor beneath. "Tonight, you see the man behind the mask of civility, a man who has deceived, manipulated, and endangered those he vowed to protect." Her eyes swept the room, daring the nobility to turn away, to ignore what they had suspected but never witnessed. The Earl's eyes burned with fury. "This is madness," he spat, voice loud enough to cut through murmurs, yet hollow against the weight of proof. "She lies. These accusations are—" "They are the truth," Eldred interrupted, stepping forward with measured authority. His gaze never left the crowd, commanding silence, respect, fear. "You have seen only the surface for too long. Tonight, we reveal what the shadows have concealed. The debts, the forgeries, the threats, all of it documented." He gestured to the scattered papers at Penelope's feet. Servants and allies of the Duke quickly arranged them for the eyes of all. Whispers grew louder as curious fingers reached for the proof. Every document, every signature, every falsified claim told the story of the Earl's manipulations. Of the estate threatened, the family endangered, the power wielded cruelly behind a genteel mask. Noble ladies clutched their fans, men straightened in disbelief. The Earl's control, so meticulously constructed, crumbled under the twin forces of evidence and courage. Penelope's throat tightened, but she forced the words out, each syllable a hammer against deceit. "He sought to silence me, to steal what was never his, to enslave my family with lies. No more. Tonight we speak truth, and justice will follow." Her voice echoed, rolling over the marble floors, through the gilded arches, touching every corner of the ballroom. Eldred's hand found hers again, steadying, grounding. He whispered, barely audible but charged with intensity, "You are stronger than you know. This is your moment, Penelope." She nodded, drawing strength from his unwavering presence, from the silent promise that he would not falter, that he would fight beside her until the end. The Earl's face contorted, a mask of arrogance slipping, revealing panic. "You cannot prove." "Yes, we can," Eldred interjected sharply. "And we will. You have used fear as your weapon, but courage will be ours. Witnesses, allies, documents, the truth stands undeniable." He lifted his chin, surveying the faces now leaning forward, curiosity and shock lighting their expressions. "And tonight, every false claim you have made will be seen for what it truly is." A hush fell, thick and expectant. Penelope took a step forward, shoulders squared, heart pounding like a drum in her chest. She held out the documents, letting them be read, handled, seen. Gasps and murmurs rippled, the room alive with the shock of revelations that could no longer be denied. The Earl stumbled, trying to regain composure, but his words faltered, the authority he clung to slipping like sand through fingers. "You underestimated her," Eldred said softly, voice only for Penelope. "And you underestimated us." The tension between them was electric, a mix of shared triumph and the storm of emotion that had carried them through weeks of fear, longing, and uncertainty. Her eyes met his, gratitude and passion mirrored in each other's gaze. The Earl's remaining allies faltered, whispers of doubt spreading, loyalty dissolving in the face of irrefutable evidence. Penelope raised her chin, strength burning through every trembling nerve. No more lies. No more fear. Justice will be done. With a final, deliberate step, she turned to Eldred, hands slipping into his as though it had always belonged there. The Duke's jaw tightened, eyes sweeping over the room, ensuring every piece of the truth had landed, that the Earl's empire of deception was broken. The man they had feared, the man who had haunted their nights and threatened their lives, now stood exposed, powerless before the courage of one woman and the steadfastness of one duke. Eldred leaned close, voice low but fierce. "It's over, Penelope. You have fought, you have spoken, and you have won. And I—" His hand rested on her cheek briefly, the brush of skin against skin igniting a fire that had been building in stolen glances and whispered promises. "I will never let anyone harm you again." Tears blurred Penelope's vision, but they were tears of relief, triumph, and something more, a deep, unshakable love that had grown in the shadows of danger. She pressed her forehead to his, letting the moment anchor them both as the Earl, defeated and exposed, was led away by authorities, his lies scattered in plain view for all to witness. A distant murmur of approval rose from the assembly, hesitant at first, then swelling into recognition and support. Penelope's courage had ignited more than justice. It had lit a spark that reshaped perception, loyalty, and respect. She turned fully to Eldred, eyes bright and fierce. "Together," she whispered, voice steady, "we faced it. Together, we finish it." He kissed her forehead, slow, deliberate, a promise sealed in the echo of the storm outside and the whisper of candlelight inside. Victory, justice, and love were theirs, hard-won, undeniable, and luminous. Penelope stood in the garden, bare feet sinking into the dew-kissed grass, heart hammering as lanterns flickered around her. The memory of the ballroom, of the Earl's smirk and the chaos he'd wrought, still gnawed at her. Yet here, under the soft glow of twilight, she felt the first breath of true freedom. Eldred appeared at the garden gate, silhouette sharp against the fading sky. His eyes, intense and unwavering, searched hers as if trying to read every secret she'd carried through the storm. "Penelope," he said, voice low, trembling only with restrained emotion. "Every risk you took, every step you braved, it led here. To this moment. To us." She swallowed hard, the lump in her throat threatening to choke her, yet courage surged through her veins. "I never imagined I could feel this," she whispered, voice fragile yet certain. "Safe. Seen. Loved." He closed the distance, hand finding hers as if the connection had always existed, bridging weeks of fear, longing, and stolen moments. "You've always been brave," Eldred said, lips just brushing her temple. "Braver than anyone knows. And now the world sees it too." The air was thick with anticipation, every rustle of leaves and distant chirp of night birds echoing the weight of the past. Penelope lifted her chin, eyes glistening with tears that were not of sorrow but of triumph. The Duke's presence beside her was a fortress, a promise, a declaration. They had survived, and now they could live. She inhaled sharply, remembering the garden where she had first hidden, trembling, after fleeing her wedding. Then all that fear, all that pain felt distant. She was not the woman who had run barefoot through the storm. She was the woman who had faced the storm and claimed victory. Eldred knelt suddenly, one knee pressing into the soft earth, eyes never leaving hers. Her breath caught. "Penelope Winters," he began, voice steady, deliberate. "From the moment I heard your voice, I knew I would follow it anywhere, through any darkness, to protect it, to protect you. Will you marry me?" Time seemed to stretch, the air holding its breath. Penelope's fingers trembled as she touched his face, memorizing the line of his jaw, the warmth of his skin. "Yes," she breathed, conviction rising in a swell of joy. "Yes, Eldred. 1,000 times yes." He rose, lifting her into his arms as if she were weightless, as if the world itself had shrunk to this perfect, sacred moment. Her laughter, bright and trembling, mingled with the evening breeze. Lanterns swayed, casting dancing shadows over their entwined forms. For the first time in her life, she felt whole. The garden was alive with the soft whisper of leaves, the scent of blooming roses, and the distant echo of the estate. No longer a prison, but a canvas for the life they would paint together. Eldred set her down gently, hands lingering on her waist as they gazed into each other's eyes. "We've fought, we've bled, we've loved in the shadows," he said, voice rich with emotion. "Now we live in the light." Penelope's smile was radiant, her chest heaving with relief and elation. She took his hand, letting their fingers intertwine naturally, effortlessly, as if they were always meant to be. "And in that light," she murmured, "we will never let fear define us again." A gentle hush settled over the garden as the first stars blinked awake. The Duke and his bride, their past trials etched into every line of their bodies, now moved forward with hope, trust, and a love that had been tested by fire and shadow. Every stolen glance, every whispered promise, every heartbeat that had once been shrouded in doubt now pulsed in unison, fierce, unbreakable, eternal. The estate doors opened and family, friends, and loyal allies appeared, their faces alight with approval and affection. Penelope and Eldred exchanged a glance, laughter bubbling up, a shared acknowledgement that the trials had been worth every scar, every tear, every sleepless night. They walked hand in hand through the lantern-lit path, past the flowers that had survived winter's bite, past the marble fountains that mirrored their reflection, knowing they had endured and emerged victorious. The world that had once threatened to cage them now bore witness to their triumph, and their love glowed brighter than the finest crystal chandeliers in the ballroom they had conquered together. As they reached the center of the garden, Eldred paused, pulling Penelope close. "Look at us," he whispered. "From shadows to light, from fear to freedom. Every step brought us here, and I would walk it 1,000 times over if it meant never letting you go." Tears welled in her eyes, and she pressed her forehead against his, breath mingling, hearts synchronized. "We are unstoppable," she murmured. "Not because the world bends for us, but because we hold each other." The moon rose high, casting silver light across their intertwined hands, illuminating the path ahead. The night was no longer dark or uncertain, it was theirs. Peace, love, and freedom stretched before them, endless and unbroken.